Agriculture has the best opportunity they've ever had. What industry do you know since the Great Recession that actually has produced almost 8% net return? Nothing. I think the opportunities exist for young people that we've never even seen before. We have so many more people on the planet. We're a global economy. We can ship anything, anywhere. And as long as there's more people, agriculture is certainly going to have an opportunity in this country, and particularly in North Carolina. We have the water, we have the facilities, we have the ports, we build an infrastructure, and we're considering agriculture as the industry that it should be. So I think it's a great opportunity, no matter what it is you're wanting to grow, to be part of North Carolina agriculture. It's got to be NC.
So over the past 20 years, craft brewing in North Carolina has come a long way, starting out with guys such as Highland Brewing and several others that were leading the way. In the last 5 or 6 years, though, in particular, there's been a really large surge in craft brewers in North Carolina, stemming generally from the Pop the Cap rule in North Carolina, which allowed alcohol to be above 6% in beers.
What's been kind of interesting about the evolution of the North Carolina market, first you have to understand that the South was considered the wasteland. Okay, when I was in Colorado, we were always talking about that, and the South would have been the biggest frontier because, you know, you're not going to dethrone mint juleps, okay? I mean, come on. It started to click. I mean, we kind of had this first phase with beer festivals starting to lead and creating some chemistry, and then we started having a few brewers, frontier brewers, seat of the pants, and then Pop the Cap came. And what Pop the Cap did that was really exciting, I mean, obviously it changed the law of that. However, what it really did was it taught North Carolinians about beer.
I had a weekly column in the News and Observer here. Raleigh was really very forward-looking because there was not a lot happening in beer culture here. But they had a weekly column, and I had to come up with something to write about every week. And anytime I ran dry, I would have a little rant about the state of the state's alcohol laws.
Up to that time, in North Carolina, you could only sell a malt beverage up to 6% alcohol by volume. It really limited the beers that you could get in North Carolina, and it limited what brewers could do with their craft.
So I would write about this periodically, and I think right around New Year's in 2003, I had my little rant, but as I suppose, for a change, I set out some steps that I thought we would have to take in order to change a law, knowing nothing about how you change a law. I just needed to hit a deadline. And it was published, and I started getting email from people saying, okay, I'm ready, where do I sign up? Let's do this, you know, let's organize.
So I had the fortune of being president of Pop the Cap, this lobbying organization that from 2002 to 2005 helped modernize North Carolina's beer law, specifically one component of the general statutes, which limited beer to 6% alcohol or less. I took my talents, such as they were, to work and collaborated with thousands of people, but most notably Julie Johnson of All About Beer magazine and Eric Galam, who was a home brewer, and the three of us were the board of Pop the Cap. Between the three of us, we really worked hard on learning more about what it meant to change the law, and then realizing we needed a lobbyist, Teresa Castrava, and she's the one who really kind of said, here's what you need to do. And ultimately in 2005, we were successful in changing this legislation.
And it just allowed for this explosion of craft beer, because what you want in craft beer is creativity. And so when these guys, you know, basically had the top blown off of this old-fashioned law, you just saw breweries springing up everywhere. In 2005, there were only a handful of breweries. In 2010, there were 45. So there was this explosion right off the bat. And now we've got over 100 breweries.
It was a matter of legitimacy for North Carolina. You can't be a legitimate beer state and have a 6% alcohol cap. You can't brew an IPA at 5.5 because the state requires you to. Thankfully, the legislature realized that that law needed to go away and that it wasn't, you know, going to lead to hellfire and brimstone. But that law helped remove one of the last vestiges of prohibition that inhibited us from strong growth.
You know, without raising that, it ended up at 15%. There's a lot of beer styles that you just can't do. So it was great to open the door and let people do that, and there was a big rush for high-gravity beers, up to 15%. Then things settled down, and this is when I think we kind of got into this phase 3 of the craft beer renaissance in North Carolina, or revolution. And that's when we had enough of serious brewers like Oscar Wong and Highland. I mean, we had enough of them. We started having a synergy of enough really good brewers so that the category was able to take off.
The other thing that it's done for the state itself is that other breweries outside North Carolina that had been kind of hovering, waiting to be able to bring in their entire portfolio, just flooded the place. And so I think for consumers here, the choice was widened. Our craft beer market has taken off. There are taps everywhere, variety everywhere. And I think, to me, most exciting, our own brewers and brewing businesses have stepped up. There are now hops being grown in North Carolina. There are small malting companies opening up. So all the things that surround good craft beer are blossoming here in the state.
Craft beer in North Carolina has the ability to touch the economy in many sectors: manufacturing, tourism, and agriculture. We're seeing brewers get so creative with local ingredients, and our farmers are always looking for ways to diversify.
Carolina has the ability at some point to create hops here, and we can create malts, and we're selling a lot of beer. Anytime a farmer around here has any hops at all the breweries pounce to jump on it. So we can say Asheville hops or Buncombe County hops or Western North Carolina hops. That means a lot to us.
So we work with a lot of different farmers, and not just farmers, but value-added agricultural entrepreneurs. So Riverbend Malt House isn't a farmer directly, but we buy their grain grown in the Salisbury area of North Carolina, malted at Riverbend, and then brewed by us.
At Atlanta Brew Supply, we partner with several North Carolina grain and yeast manufacturers. So in Pittsboro, very local to Raleigh, we partner with Farm Boy Farms, which is a grain farm. And then we also work with Riverbend Malt House. We actually just started that relationship, very excited about that. And also South Yeast Labs.
Farm Boy Farms was started 5 years ago. I was just a home brewer. And then my father-in-law had 80 acres of property out here in Pittsboro, North Carolina. And we decided to put some beer in the ground. And we had success. We used American Malting Barley Association recommended 2-row and 6-row. We definitely do focus on the quality and actually using grains intended to brew beer. And then we also spoke with North Carolina State University over in Raleigh and attended some workshops they had to figure out which hops grow in the Piedmont. And based on their research, that's what we also put in the ground in our hop yard. And that's how it started 5 years ago. And now it's increased in capacity. The building that we're in right now did not exist 5 years ago, as well as our expanding hop yard, using our healthy existing plants that are already growing here in North Carolina to expand our hop yard. So we are growing a little bit slower, but we're growing with our healthy quality plants. And then we are reaching out to area farmers to obtain their support to grow more and more grain, because we just can't grow enough on our property that we have.
The idea to start the malt house kind of came into play in the summer of 2010, where Brian Simpson, my business partner, and I were just considering the whole craft industry and really came to the realization that there were tons of local breweries making local beer, but they weren't using truly local ingredients.
We just saw the need for the local supply of grains as the base product for these craft beers. We also wanted to achieve an artisan product to offer unique flavor profiles and truly a Southern beer that would be unique to our region.
During the next 12 months, we really dove in head first, talked with scientists at North Carolina Ag Extension Program, NC State University, USDA Agricultural Research Service, and also the Canadian Malting and Barley Technical Center, where we ended up doing an intensive training program in the summer of 2011.
All the breweries coming into Asheville is really going to help promote hops in this area in West North Carolina. It makes it easier to talk people into growing hops, or helps me promote hops through the local farmers, and then they know that they have a place to sell their hops.
And started small, but then now that we've been able to expand and get that quality data, just kept growing and growing. Also meeting the demand of, once people became to know about us, whether it be home brewers or microbreweries that we've been able to reach out to, then they just want more and more. We, specifically speaking with hops, we just cannot grow enough of those.
Hop shoots are actually one of the highest vegetables that you can buy. You know, truffles used to be the highest, and now hop shoots are. I think in the UK they're going for, I think it was $1,500 for 2 pounds. Before harvest this year, selling rhizomes and hop shoots, we'd already made more money than we did the year before.
The hops industry in North Carolina has been growing, obviously, and there's a lot of questions about it. Dr. Janine Davis and NC State University, as well as a lot of others in the university system itself, have been getting some grants, been doing some research work. What are the varieties? Are there diseases here? Are there insects? Yes, there are. So those are things that we've got to look at. We also have to be able to say, do our practices, do farmer practices, what are the things that they're going to have to change? So all these things are going to take research, it's going to take demonstration, and the main thing it's going to take is a farmer's involvement. Because it doesn't matter what a crop is. If there's not a dollar in it, then a farmer's not going to be interested in it.
Right now, North Carolina is working very hard with the state, and North Carolina State Agriculture is working with local farmers to try to figure out what hops grow best. Is it a viable crop for North Carolina? It's going to take a lot of dollar investment, because one of the challenges, yes, we can grow it, but how do you use it year round? It needs to be dried and pelletized or dried and baled, and we don't have that kind of facility here yet, but that's coming.
It was in 2007 that I started receiving phone calls from growers here in North Carolina who had heard that there was a hops shortage. So this looked like an opportunity for them to grow a crop that would make them money. And so that's when the first hop yards really started being established in North Carolina, was in 2007. And very, very quickly there were a lot of questions on what varieties do we grow, how do we grow them, what should a trellis look like? And so that's when we got our first grants shortly thereafter to start establishing research hop yards. Originally there was this one here and one in Raleigh also, and starting to look at what do growers need to know to be able to grow a profitable crop.
The craft brewery people are exceptionally smart. They know what they're looking for. We can buy malt, we can buy grains from anywhere else in the world. We can buy hops from anywhere else in the world, and that's going to be consistent. So we're going to have to be consistent here. That consistency is also important. We're going to have a consistent yield. That means people growing together. You're going to have enough. As a good example of sweet potatoes, it's grown tremendously in Europe, as an example. From North Carolina, they want North Carolina sweet potatoes. Why? Because they taste good and they know what they're getting. But to do that, we've got to produce more and more sweet potatoes. We can't keep up. I think that's exactly what's got to happen here. In North Carolina, you tell us you want something, we'll produce it. If there's a dollar in it, it'll be at your door. And that's as simple as I can put it.
So we developed our hop research program and extension program from the demand of the growers. And so we've worked very closely with the growers. Our original studies, we were out on all these various farms collecting samples. So we were working with Blue Ridge Hop, Echo View, Hop and Blueberry Farm over in Black Mountain. And all of them have been really wonderful about letting us come out and collect data, collect soil samples, learn how to grow hops in North Carolina. And they continue to be very close partners with us. The breweries have also been involved, and in particular, I'm thinking of John Stewart with Green Man, who has come to our conference and talked for an hour, letting the growers understand what their needs are. And that's really important. We need to understand, the breweries need to understand the constraints the growers are up against, and growers need to understand what the brewers need. And the more those collaborations work closely together, I think the better it's going to be for growing this industry.
I don't really know what the acreage is going to be needed for the amount of hops. I do know that we can grow as much grain as they can use. That's going to be our big picture, is that being able to grow the grain so they don't have to transport it 1,800 miles to get it here. To do that, we'll also have another industry that can be part of that, and that's malt. That's an excellent opportunity. Now, why do I bring this up? It's simple. Agriculture is only 2% of the population, but we're 20% of the economy as far as employment in North Carolina. It's a $78 billion industry. When you provide jobs at a plant, whether it's a craft brewery or it's BMW, whatever is there, those people from the craft brewery are getting their income from agriculture one way or the other, but they may not even realize it. So then you have the transportation, you have all the marketing, you have people that are going to be part of agriculture. So that's where this is going to be critical. If we can all work together, who knows what could happen with hops. It may be like burley tobacco when it started. It may be like apples. It could be like the Christmas trees. It could be like the sweet potatoes. But only time will tell on that.
I did not know what craft beer was until I was probably 21, 22. And I have seen this industry blossom. In fact, my very first job in the alcohol beverage business was at a wholesaler in the Triad of North Carolina, near Greensboro. And I sold this beer called Highland. And it was the first beer I had ever seen that was a North Carolina beer that was, available on the shelves of grocery stores and bottle shops. And, it was really small at that point. And now it's the largest homegrown brewery in North Carolina.
Highland was started in 1994. It was the first legal brewery in Asheville since Prohibition. My father started it, and he's a former engineer. Even crazier, he was born in Jamaica, and he's full-blooded Chinese. Went to Notre Dame, so he claims he's Irish, and then started a Scottish brewery here in Asheville.
I spent 26 years in the engineering profession. I was licensed in 7 states, and then eventually I sold my company in Charlotte, North Carolina. We loved coming up here to Asheville and to vacation, and we decided to settle here. Mutual friend introduced me to an award-winning brewer who talked me into getting into it, and my wife was ecstatic to get out of the house after being home for 4 years. So therein lies the formation of Highland Brewing in 1994, and now it'll be 20 years in 2014, and hopefully sometime that year, I will be playing the role of Colonel Saunders of Highland Brewing.
So we went from 3 people in 1994. 13 years later, we moved to this new facility. So we've got 180,000 square feet in this building. We don't use all of it right now, but we have lots of room to grow. And we went from 3 people to just over 40 full-time folks. And we'll make around just under 40,000 barrels of beer this year. So we're not a big brewery by any means, but we're not a teeny one. We're in this really cool middle space. We've grown really organically, where we like to go deep rather than wide. That's been on purpose from the leadership of the company. I think part of that's what happens when you get a 55-year-old that starts a brewery.
This guy did it right. He poured a lot of money into that brewery and lost a lot of money for years and years, but he insisted on putting a quality product out, dumped the first couple of batches of beer that he made because it wasn't up to his personal standards. And I really feel like if he hadn't come in here and set the bar high, we wouldn't see Asheville as a beer city now, because we might have 1 or 2 little small craft breweries. A lot of cities do. But I don't think we would see Asheville and Western North Carolina with this amazing beer scene that we've got here without the groundwork that he laid for it back in '94.
When Highland opened in '94, we were the only brewery in town, and that's so hard to imagine now. I think there are 13 here, but it kind of changes maybe on a daily basis. We've got really huge breweries coming to town or already here, and down to nano breweries. and Micro, and they've opened recently. It's really exciting to have that kind of camaraderie, and that's what is so true about the craft brewing industry is there's true camaraderie.
The decision to finally end up here in Western North Carolina was quite a long process, took months and months. We ended up looking at a number of sites, probably about 20 to 40 different sites, narrowed that down where we wanted to be. It really had to be a culture fit along with obviously some needs that we had, transportation, utilities, land, that sort of thing.
And so Asheville, just as part of the process, just hit so many of these buckets that we had, from water quality to culture to the brewing community, to access to the north, the east, and the northeast, which is a real big reason why we needed to build another brewery, because we've always been just a Western brewery.
And finally, what really drove it was not only the outdoors, not only the community, but also the acceptance that we see in Western North Carolina for the craft industry. So you want to stay around your peers. You want to feel that acceptance, and that was huge here.
You know, meeting people has been really easy, and the community's been, it's been nice, open arms. You never meet a stranger in this town, and folks are really excited to talk about the brewery and the processes that we've got, ahead of us. So it's been a great experience.
Foothills Brewing is a craft brewery in downtown Winston-Salem on 4th Street. So how did it get there? Well, some years ago, I was involved as the president of the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership, and its goal was to revitalize a downtown community that over the years had really descended into just being an 8 to 5 place. People come downtown, work, get lunch, go home. So how do we rebuild a downtown? One of the ways you do that is make things that are attractive, that are fun, that people want to come and visit and be a part of. A craft brewery was ideal because they were not only making the beer right there, they were serving it, and they added food to it to create Foothills Brewing right on the 4th Street, which is like the main street of downtown Winston-Salem. And it created a buzz. And around that buzz then became people who decided, well, shoot, I like this so much, I want to live downtown. So we started creating condo buildings and apartment buildings and places for people to reside. So it's all so much a part and so much a necessary part of rebuilding a downtown, and that was our goal. And the microbrewery in this case was really a part of it.
There's something about this place that draws people here. It's that beautiful mountain backdrop. We are surrounded by the highest peaks in the east, and people really, they come here to live here. So we have this community of creative entrepreneurs that are just making it work here in Asheville because they want to be here.
It's a very much a BYOJ city. I mean, you bring your own job, and so people here support private businesses more than they might in an industrial town or a larger city.
North Carolina's beer community is fascinating, and it's one of the reasons that I got into the business was that when I worked on Pop the Cap, I had no intention of starting up my own brewery, but I love the industry, I love the people, and I realized I'm good at beer, and I wanted to be a part of it. Why? Because it's so much fun. I mean, people are friendly and kind to each other, supportive of one another, and it's an industry like no other. It's a little hard to describe, but we really work in cooperation and in competition. And there's the single worst phrase in the human language called co-opetition, which I don't like that amalgamation, but it does describe pretty well what we do in the craft beer industry in North Carolina. We are competitors. We are trying to get tap handles and presence and share of mind. But in that process, we're gonna do things like order grain together or go in on a bourbon barrel order together to save shipping.
When I think about competition amongst the breweries that are here in Durham, I really don't see any. There's absolutely kind of a brotherhood, sisterhood mentality here. If we are expecting grain on Wednesday, but we've got a brew on Tuesday and we need an extra 50 pounds of pale malt, I can call up one of the other breweries here in town and we're all sharing, helping if we need some hops or something until a delivery comes. Everybody pitches in.
Being the first, we helped a lot of other brewers that started up, and it continues to grow. Now we have 14 breweries in the city of Asheville itself. We have a collaborative type of appreciation for each other. So we would help them with grain, yeast, sometimes even process. Because we believe that if you have a weak brewery, it reflects on all the other breweries.
It was really important for us to actually like kind of sit down and talk with the brewers that have been here before us, just to make sure, honestly, that they're cool with it. You know, before we made any decisions or any announcements one way or the other, Brian Grossman and Ken Grossman, our founders, actually flew out and met with the Asheville Brewers Association and sat down with them and talked to them honestly and said, listen, if you guys have reservations, that's fine. You know, all's fair, we understand. There's no hard feelings. And by and large, the Asheville brewing community has gone out of its way to really kind of open its arms and welcome us here. I can't believe it. I mean, it's been amazing to be, you know, a part of the scene that these guys have done so much work for. It's just great.
They are all seem to be very concerned about making sure that they don't step on toes of the existing brewers in the community, because they want to be part of the community too and not come in as a big 500-pound gorilla.
Craft beer in general is such a great industry. There's such a community aspect about craft beer since it was kind of born in America. The creativity is here, the inspiration and the passion for the industry. And so that all comes back to individual people. There's a connection from there to local communities. And so we're just one of many breweries that like to give back.
With all of our festivals, we bring in a nonprofit, a charity, to be part of it because we're very committed to the community. That's the essence of beer for me. Community, romance, adventure. Those are the three things. So not only are we bringing all the beer community together into one thing, but we also like to bring a relevant charity that resonates with our customers to help anchor us into the community. So we have been writing checks to the Carolina Theater for, 10 years. And in Raleigh, we've gone in a really other direction in that we sponsor and support Artsplosion.
Brewgrass, not only to educate the masses, but we also throw Brewgrass to benefit Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Western North Carolina. This is their yearly largest check written every year for the last 17 years. Big Brothers, Big Sisters brings me about 75 volunteers to every Brewgrass, and I love supporting them.
Yeah, from a deeper philosophical level, we wanted to develop a business that had sustainability in mind, reached out to its community, and also, at the end of the day, produced a higher quality product. And we're a triple bottom line company, so we're people, planets, profits, in that order. We wanted to make sure we stuck to that whenever we developed the business. The craft beer boom allowed us to create this opportunity for ourselves in a niche market where we see most of the products that are being used as the base for the beer are coming from all over the world. And we can close that gap to less than 500 miles.
What we're looking to do is build a community center that reflects Durham. And so we've been really, really excited about how Durham has responded to our presence here. Basically, we flung open the door and said, how would you like to see this space evolve? And thankfully, the patrons that visited us early on gave us a lot of suggestions and criticism and supported us in this process so that we learned more. I mean, because I'm a business person, but I'm not a restaurateur. I've never owned a tavern before. I've certainly never owned a brewery before. So knowing what the community wants, knowing how to adapt to their interests and shape an experience that reflects Durham has been really, really rewarding for us because our patrons have stuck with us and grown with us as we've evolved.
The relationship between the craft beers and the Durham Bulls, it really goes beyond just serving it in a concession stand or in a portable. What we've tried to do with the local breweries is really create a partnership to where we're helping them. We're helping them get into grocery stores. We're helping them grow their business. So this isn't just about trying to sell some bottles of beer. This is about really creating and trying to get the word out about their beers, getting them to sell more. And I think we're going to be able to do that with a lot more beers in the future because, obviously these start as small companies and, they put a lot of work and a lot of effort into building this. And the great thing about with the local breweries, they have a lot of passion. And that's what we have here. We have a lot of passion to put on the best product here for the Bulls. So when I see local breweries kind of have that same passion we do for their business like we do for ours, you want to help them out.
We created Raleigh Brewing to be a part of the community of Raleigh and also embrace the energy around the craft brewing industry within Raleigh. We have a strong lineup of beers, each of individual styles that represent a part of the history of Raleigh. And within that, there has definitely been quite a few of those that are being embraced by the community of Raleigh, basically tapping the capital, which is our hashtag Tap the Capital. The distribution is going well, and we're excited. We're a year into production, and we're very excited about how things are going.
I'll tell you a story. We went to Germany and Belgium a couple years ago with a crew from Highland Brewing Company. Just went over there for 10 days to drink beer, which was a pretty cool little vacation, let me tell you. And so we're in this little 19th century steam-powered brewery in the middle of nowhere in Belgium. And, we just gotten off a plane from flying all night from Atlanta. And we're sitting in there drinking beer. And some people at the next table said, where are you from? And I looked over and I said, we're from Asheville, North Carolina, in the United States. And the guy looked at me and so help me God, he said, Beer City, USA. And I thought, boy, that got out of here. Word got around on that. So I guess I realized at that point just how famous Asheville was as a beer town.
The brewery scene here is unlike anything else I've ever seen. Even in my hometown of Bend, Oregon, which is kind of where it started in Portland, and it's just exploding here. I've been here 6 years, and just what I've seen in this short amount of time has been very exciting. I've recently gone home to Bend, and there were 6 new breweries I tried there, and none of them stood up to what Asheville had to offer.
One of the things that's made this such a rich culture here for beer is the fact that nationwide people are moving towards craft beers, and people are not going out and drinking 6 beers, they're drinking 2 beers. So if you're gonna drink 2 beers, it's okay to pay an extra couple of bucks and get a handcrafted artisanal beer.
The micros are on fire. That category is screaming. Out in Seattle, I believe it's like a 50 share. Here in North Carolina, it's like a 15 share. So the upside of it is tremendous. You can see the domestic beers, they're shrinking and they're concerned. They're starting to get into the category. They've purchased some breweries. Budweiser's purchased Goose Island. Miller's invested into Terrapin. So they're looking at it. Do you create beer or do you buy beers is what they're looking at. But the craft category is definitely the hot button right now.
What's incredibly exciting for us is that the shelf space that we have designated for beers specifically from North Carolina has doubled in size already. More and more packaging options, both bottles and cans. We have an ever-expanding selection of growlers straight from the brewery that's taking up more and more shelf space. So it's very exciting for us, and we try to support homegrown North Carolina beers as much as we possibly can.
We like to call North Carolina the state of Southern beer because North Carolina has more breweries and brew pubs than any other Southern state. And I say that south of Pennsylvania and east of Texas. We are #1.
Brewing is very important to North Carolina's economy. I think it's such a marvelous example for the potential that exists in our state for small business. It's been great to see the growth of the craft beer industry in North Carolina. Small brewers, medium-sized, even larger ones that are coming to the state.
When we talk about a beer economy for North Carolina, what we're talking about is truly building something from the ground up. Prior to the malt house opening, you had a very much a disconnect between the barley and other small grains that were grown in North Carolina, primarily sent into the commodity markets or even kept on farm to feed cattle in a dairy operation, for example. And so when we talk about building the craft beer ecosystem and economy, we're talking about improved handling, improved quality of the grain, higher prices paid to our farmers, and jobs in trucking, jobs in seed cleaning. All these different pieces of the puzzle start to become North Carolina's economic engine rather than Western US, Western Canada, or Western Europe.
North Carolina ranks 19th in production. We've got a long way to go to be in the top 10, in terms of how much beer we brew. But that said, they're already telling us that the economic impact of North Carolina craft beer is nearly $800 million. And that's based on data that's 2 years old. And not only that, but craft beer in North Carolina creates 10,000 jobs. When you add up the brewery positions, the wholesalers, the truck drivers, the people that work at the bottle shops, the people that work in the bars and the restaurants, you know, it's a total economic impact that's really significant and has a great potential to grow if we get support to help it grow.
North Carolina ranked number 10 in the nation in 2012 in craft brewers, over 70 in the state, number 19 in terms of production. So we're sitting in a great position and a great opportunity for new growth.
The craft beer industry, by virtue of who it is and where it's located, creates sales taxes by the selling of the product. They create withholding taxes by the people who work there. Withholding taxes, that's money that's taken out of your paycheck. And those funds are deposited in what we call the general fund of the state of North Carolina. So what does the general fund do? It supports all of the state activities that are important to you and me. Education of our young people, whether it's the K through 12 program, community college, or even the university system. It supports the infrastructure, whether we allow law enforcement or whether we have fire departments and folks like that who serve as needed, but they're supported by the general fund of the state of North Carolina. Things like the infrastructure of highways and things like stop signs and stop lights are all supported by the general fund, all of which is created by funds coming in from various sources, including the craft beer industry, to allow the state to operate in a positive manner.
Beer is one of the most highly taxed items out there, anywhere. It shares that with other alcoholic beverages. But, you know, from the very beginning, beer is taxed. You know, the inputs that go on into the beer, the brewers are paying sales tax. They're paying taxes for their employees just like any other business. But then they're also paying excise tax. And that is not something that's, you know, commonplace among regular products. So they pay federal excise tax, and then on top of that, they pay a state excise tax. And the state excise tax is the 8th highest in the nation. At 62 cents a gallon, that is more gallon by gallon than the gasoline tax in this state. The excise tax is technically a penalty on alcoholic beverages in order to try to reduce consumption, reduce abuse. Well, I am here to tell you that craft beer drinkers are, in general, you know, well-educated, responsible people who are contributing greatly to this economy. What we want is for our brewers to be able to reinvest some of that money into hiring people.
For a long period of time in Asheville, I was just known as Oscar's daughter, and I swore I would get a t-shirt made with that. But that's fine. I really am honored to know what people think of him and what he started here in Asheville. There weren't a whole lot of big businesses and industries on this side of the state. And so in '94, what he did without realizing it is not only start a company, but start something that turned into an industry for Asheville. And that's, to me, is really important. I'm really proud of him and everybody here.
There's a lot of creativity in the beer scene. It's going beyond the breweries now. It has its tentacles out into the community, and we have events and festivals, local businesses. There's even a guy who's making shampoo and body products out of local beer, and that stuff's going national. The hop farms are offering tours and experiences. There are creative tours. There's even a spa treatment where you can soak your feet in local beer. There are just so many experiences and touch points for the locals and for the visitors that involve the breweries here. It's much more than just sitting down and doing a tasting at a brewery.
I think the biggest impact that the craft beer community would be the beer tourism, as far as how it affects the rest of like our neighbors, and beer tourism has become something that's it's always been kind of going on, but lately people are making what they're calling them beer pilgrimages to Portland, to San Diego, and now Asheville is very much listed in there, especially with the brewery density. You can come here for a weekend and hit 15 breweries and still leave very hungover and still with hundreds of, or with dozens of breweries that you still haven't hit.
Oh, I think there's a great correlation there. A lot of people are coming in here now, visiting Asheville, and they want to go around and visit local breweries. There are a number of tour services here that do nothing but take you around to the local breweries and get you behind the scenes and let you try the beer. We're going to see even more of that when Sierra opens up and when New Belgium opens up, because people will be coming in from all over the country to visit just those two breweries alone.
Rick Guthey, one of the owners of Wicked Weed, just showed me an article that was saying that within 2 years, when New Belgium and Sierra Nevada are open, it's going to bring an additional 1 million visitors to Asheville for beer.
And so when I think about the fact that our breweries in our area are not just a wonderful place to visit, a wonderful place to work, they are an economic indicator that we can't ignore.
Well, the influence of the craft beer industry on Bottle-Mix is just simply amazing. Quite honestly, it's a huge draw. It's really what brings in that particular demographic in through the doors to peruse the shop and see what interesting beers that we have. It's very interesting from an educational perspective when we do certain events in the store, that we have folks from the brewery, sometimes the sales representatives, sometimes the brewers are coming here to share with our customers, to show them what they do in their craft and how that's impacting us as consumers. So a lot of different exciting things go into how the craft beer industry is making our business successful.
So we started Raleigh Brewing with a 20-barrel brew house, which is twice the size of what normal craft brewers would start out with. A lot of craft brewers start anywhere between 7 to 10 barrels brew houses. And we started with a 20-barrel brew house because we saw a lot of expansion happening with these smaller brew houses where they were working 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we are excited about working that hard as well. But we thought if we could go ahead and increase the size of our brew house, and to meet demand, early demand, then we thought that would be a safe bet. A little bit more cost on the brew house, but definitely pay off in the future. And that has definitely come to fruition. So our first year, we were 1,000-barrel production, and we plan on being up to 2,500 to 3,000-barrel production as we move into the next year.
When we opened, we ran out of food the first weekend we opened. I did not anticipate the demand that we created and the thirst for craft beer and local grass-fed beef. It was off the charts. And when you study business, you hear these examples of how it's so successful they went under. We were on the verge of that. I'd say in our first 8 weeks, we had to double our staff. I'm incredibly proud that we now have 40 employees on our staff. These are people who have mortgages, rental payments, car payments, children. That is very much at the core of what we do here. I have to make sure that this restaurant is here tomorrow. They depend on it.
In Brevard, we chose a existing structure. So what we did is we went in and we upfitted that location to basically have a brewery there. And currently we employ 40 employees, 35 of which are from North Carolina. And that's very important to us. And future plans are to bring in more fermentation vessels to expand capacity. And also we're looking at adding a restaurant to the location.
The tie between the local brews and the vending here, it's been significant, and it continues to grow, and we really foresee it being a major impact on us going forward. This isn't something that we're gonna, all of a sudden, 49 different brands is a lot of beer, but we're looking at ways. We're doing a $15 million renovation coming up this off season. Part of that is really looking into, not only from a beer standpoint, but from a food standpoint, trying to go even further with the variations we do. So what we're doing now is in my mind, is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of, and it's all about giving people the selections that they want. We're not about just serving a few things. We want everybody that comes here from all parts of the triangle, all parts of the country, to have the beer that they like. And the more we can get here, the more microbrews, the more local brews, that's only going to help us and help the fan.
Our business model has shifted from being really driven by major brands like Miller Lite or Miller High Life or Ice House or Yuengling, to having Yuengling, which is a straddle brand between a Miller Lite Budweiser and a craft beer. It is America's oldest brewery, after all, 1829, I think. Still family owned. You've got that piece of the business. Craft beer has taken off so much that the Boston Beers of the world, the Sierra Nevadas, Lagunitas, Anchor Steam, these breweries are growing like crazy, and to the point where Sierra Nevada is getting ready to open a facility in North Carolina at Mills River.
So when we started building our second brewery, we brought a core group of people from California, but it was really only a little better than a dozen. All told, the production end of the brewery will employ, give or take, 90 full-time people. And then when the restaurant and the kind of customer experience part of the brewery, we expect that to be another 150 jobs. The bulk of that will be full-time, just kind of depending on what we need it to be. So, we think at the end of the day, it'll probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 new jobs.
The economic impact of sourcing grain locally allows us to connect the farmer to a $1.3 billion craft beer industry in North Carolina. When we talk about starting from the ground up, we talk about recycling dollars in the community multiple times and maintaining a lot of that dollar in the community. We also hire a lot of local firms to help process the grain, clean it, deliver it. All these things come into play when we talk about strengthening and creating a beer economy in North Carolina.
Craft beer is still such a small percentage of overall beer sales that it needs to be more craft beer rises, all the boats in the water. That's really important to us right now. We're trying to push for more and more. And that creates stronger, more education in the market. The more educated the beer drinker is, the better they'll appreciate what we're all doing. And we'll convert people from the macro breweries to the craft beer world. That's really what it's about. I do hope that more breweries open in Durham. Not too many, but certainly there's room for another one or two breweries to come in because it will just provide more diversity and more great stuff for Durham.
The growth of the business on the craft side has been tremendous, and one thing that we are putting into our business planning is continued growth from craft. I've seen some people nationally forecast maybe a 20 share for craft by 2020. And at least in the Triangle area, I certainly think that that's a realistic proposition.
And we found that craft brewing is a big boon to the economy all over the country because, relatively speaking, we are rather inefficient. If you take a big brewery that produces millions of barrels a year, they'll produce per person 10, 20 times what we can do per person because of the equipment and the technology. So even though we're inefficient, we sure help the job employment situation a lot.
Here in North Carolina, I don't believe there is a saturation point for craft brewing. If you look at Colorado or California and how many breweries per capita there are, it's almost the same in North Carolina. We just don't have as many breweries yet. And really, there's all sizes of breweries and all sorts of products that can meet your consumer's need. As a craft brewing industry, we only have 7% of the market, which means only 7% of that beer is craft beer being sold. So we're not even close to the tipping point.
There are now craft beer aisles in Target. Aisles, not just a section, but a whole aisle. There's so many different ranges now. We've got nano breweries dealing with neighborhood markets. Then we've got micro craft breweries dealing with communities. Then we've got these giant craft breweries that are also exporting a large percentage of their beer. So everyone's finding it. And fortunately, it's a very complex market.
North Carolina has some reasonable regulations that allow for growth in that up to a certain stage, you can actually self-distribute, which is a big help. We never did, but it allows somebody to grow without the cost of the middleman. What do I expect? I think it's going to continue to grow because it has taken root. We're probably close to the national average as far as the amount of beer that we sell from the craft brewing side. Definitely under 10%. In Portland, it's over 30%. So we have room to grow, and I think it will grow.
I think the demand for hops in North Carolina is just part of our whole movement in this state to grow more of all of the food that we eat. And it just makes sense with this craft brew industry developing the way it is, along with our local food movement, that we would grow as many of the ingredients as we can.
When you think about what's next for Asheville and where are we going, how can you top what you've already done? Well, our community college has gotten involved, and so they're looking at academic studies around the brewing economy and how to make sure brewers are good, strong business individuals as well. They're looking at how do we look at the science and the technology to support brewing. So that's where we go next.
I think there's probably a little concern that with this kind of growth, that inevitably these people will be in competition with one another. but that is really at odds with the culture of the craft industry. Yes, eventually there's going to be a little bit of a squeeze for maybe ingredients, maybe space at bars, maybe retail space. But right now, I think there's still scope for growth. Even though some competition will creep in, that comes as a consequence of good, healthy growth, I think the collaborative nature of the craft industry runs very, very deep.
What people need to understand is we've got to keep farms profitable. We can't all just grow corn and soybeans. So if we want to keep the diversity of agriculture, we have to make investments in looking at new crops, such as hops. Look in North Carolina what our wine grape industry did. Now we've got wineries and vineyards all over the state, and that's what we hope to see with the hops industry.
North Carolina, I think, is the nation's best kept secret.
If I could tell people one thing about North Carolina craft beer, if they'd never had one before, my first word would be flavor. I think that's what this whole movement is about, frankly, is flavor.
We're having a proliferation of beer bars. Every bar that opens now has 40 taps minimum. They start at 40.
I think the only way is up for craft brewers in North Carolina. This industry has grown dramatically. We're pleased with that growth and see there's a great upside. It's the right environment, the right economy, the right business climate, and we want to be sure that continues.
I mean, craft beer is hot all over the country, but if you ask craft beer fans outside of the state, you know, they are noticing what's happening in North Carolina. And some of the most creative stuff that you'll find in the craft beer world is happening right here in North Carolina.